are the hand that catches my fall. You are the friend that answers my call. You are my day, you are my night, you are my love, you are my life. You are the love I need, you are the air I breathe, you are my love, my life, always, forever.
I'm Steve Carr, pastor of Calvary Chapel in Arroyo Grande, and I'd like to welcome you to our program. Marriages and families are in great turmoil today in our country. I'm sure you would agree. But how is your marriage doing? What's going on behind the door of your home? Is your marriage in trouble? Have you given up hope, thinking there are no solutions to the conflicts between you and your spouse? I want to encourage you today that there are answers to these struggles. Where can you find these answers? I believe the one who created marriage knows how it works best. So please, get your spouse, get your Bible, and open your heart to God's truth today. You know, one thing that I think that's very interesting when you see this particular text that we're going to look at tonight, how many exhortations there are here for the man. The woman has basically just one, just submit to your husband, and maybe a second one, which we looked at, to be his helper, okay? But I'll tell you, there is a whole long list of issues that we're going to look at here tonight for you fellows. So what is your responsibility as a husband? What has God called you to do? Let's just read here verse 25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that which should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For as we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife. That word love there is in the present tense, by the way. Must continually love his own wife as himself. And let the wife see that she respects, and that word is in the present tense as well. She continually should respect her husband. Now this is a passage of Scripture you've probably heard many Bible studies on. It's a topic that I believe is very important for today and our struggle that we see going on in the family. This aspect of the husband's responsibility. What are you supposed to do? What is your responsibility? Well, the first one here is verse 25. Love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. He said, this is a great mystery, verse 32. I speak concerning Christ and the church. So really the husband-wife responsibility, both of your responsibilities, is just summed up in that picture of the the Lord's love for his church and the responsibility of the church to respond to the head, or to Jesus. And so it's essential. You see the simplicity of this responsibility. So whenever you look and try and define what are you supposed to do, well, take it always back into that context, and you will never go wrong. And I'll tell you, every single time I've counseled someone where there is an error, they have failed to do just that, to keep it simple, because that is what he wants us to do here. And the simplicity of it is he wants you to just love your wives, just like Christ loved the church. Now, how did Christ love the church? Well, several different ways. He lays this out for us here. The first way is that your responsibility is to love your wife sacrificially. That's the way Christ loved the church. He gave himself. Now, so this is simply talking about unselfish living and giving of yourself. You give of yourself when you feel like it and when you don't feel like it. When you don't feel like it is when it's truly sacrificial giving. It wouldn't be a sacrifice if you felt like getting up when you're in the middle of your football game, to be able to go help your wife when she's asking you to help her. So I think it's very important to see that that is what sacrificial giving is. And so sacrificial giving is in many different ways, in many different means, to this one particular end. Giving of your time. You know, a man's time is very precious. My time is really precious. And I know yours is as well. And so when your wife asks you to help her in a particular area, it's a sacrifice. It really is, because you've got a whole list of things that you want to do and you want to take care of around your house, you know, personally. I mean, sports or just maybe a hobby. Whatever the issue is. And so to give sacrificially means you have to pass on something maybe you want to do, and you serve your spouse. Giving of your time, your attention. Your attention is many times just as sacrificial. To give your attention, to turn your eyes away from the television set, the newspaper, the book you're reading, the thing that you're working on, and look at my eyes. I'm talking to you. Listen to one another. I mean, this is such an important thing. And it's really what giving is all about. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5, it says, "Love does not behave rudely. Love does not seek its own." You see, love is an unselfish giving. And to be unselfish in itself is sacrificial, because we are basically selfish individuals. And we all have our own agenda. Male or female, I don't care who you are. We are all selfish individuals. And so to love means that you have to give in this manner. To truly demonstrate your love, the primary way that you do that is by giving yourself. Giving of yourself. Every single thing that I'm going to tell you to do tonight is going to require you to sacrificially give of yourself. This is just the general principle that he establishes before he goes down the list here, because he wants us to get this understanding clearly in our hearts and minds. In John 15:13, it says, "Their greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." So if your wife is your friend, then you will lay your life down for her. You will lovingly sacrifice for her, because that's what love does. It's the primary way that you give to your wife. Now, secondly, your second responsibility is to sanctify her and your family through the word. Notice verse 26 and 27. That he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word. Now notice that this is in the sentence that was there in verse 25. It's the same sentence. I just stopped in the middle of the sentence. So for him to love his wife as Christ loved the church, then now he begins to list the specifics of how to do that. He says you've got to sanctify and cleanse your wife with the washing of the water of the word, that he might present it as Christ presented the church to himself, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that it should be holy and without blemish. So this is what your responsibility is. If you truly love your wife, then you will sanctify her by the word. You will sanctify your family through the word. Now we will come in our next study, notice verse 4 of chapter 6. It says, you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. So a father is to know the word well enough that he might teach the word. So you husbands are the shepherd of your flock, the shepherd of your home. And that shepherd will always keep his sheep clean so they will not get diseased. That's what a shepherd does. And that's the image that is used here, cleansing your family with the word. Jesus said in John 15:3 to his disciples, you are already clean or pure because of the word which I have spoken to you. And so the word of God has a sanctifying effect upon your wife and upon your children, upon your home as a whole, which means that you must minister that word in your home in some way. You are the primary spiritual instructor in your house. Now, that doesn't mean that your wife cannot spiritually instruct as well and minister to your children as well. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 8 makes it very clear. It says that a husband is to have that responsibility, and a mother or wife. And so both do that work, but it is primarily your responsibility as the husband, as the father. Which basically means you pray with your wife. You encourage her spiritually. You share what you're learning from your devotional time with your wife. You share what you're learning with your children. And I'll tell you, it's a very powerful and important aspect of the Christian family. Without it, your home will not be sanctified. Guaranteed. And this is one thing that is missing in so many Christian homes today. I usually ask couples, I go, well, where do you guys have devotions? Where do you share the word with each other? Where does this take place? Well, it doesn't. Well, where do you train your kids? Oh, the Sunday school does that. Well, but it's still your primary responsibility. You see, one day, both husband and wife will be called to account for how they have ministered to their children. But you, husbands, fathers, will be primarily held to account for how you have ministered to your children and to your wife, to your family as a whole. Because this is your responsibility. This is your call. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 7, notice at the beginning of the nation Israel, this is what God said to the people. He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God The Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. Diligently to your children. Are you doing that? And then he says, and talk of them. Notice he gives you 4 places where and when you should do it. He uses the word when 4 times here. When you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. So wherever you have a sitting opportunity in your home, this is probably one of the best times when you're sitting together. I have found the best place to do this is when we're sitting at the breakfast table or dinner table. That's when I did it with my boys, and I've since transferred it to dinner time. It's a little easier. And so you pick the time. But it is the time when you're all sitting together, and it's a great opportunity because when your kids are young, they are occupied, they're not going anywhere, their mouth is full, and it's a great opportunity for you to communicate with them and to share with them. And take the time. Take the opportunity. And it's as simple as just share what the Lord is giving you, what he's teaching you out of the Word. And when you do that on a regular basis, it's not going to happen every single day, but on a regular basis, minister the Word to your kids and to your wife, and share those spiritual things that are so important to communicate. The third thing he tells you to do is in verse 28 and 29. He says, so husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it. And so here he declares really that you should be nourishing and cherishing your wife and basically meeting her needs, just like you meet your own needs. You see, notice he says here, love your wife as your own body. Now, do you take care of yourself? Do you take care of your own body? Do you take care of your own needs? Well, if you take care of your own needs, then you should be taking care of her needs. Now, what he's really getting at here, he's going to actually say in verse 31, when he's going to quote the Old Testament passage about us becoming one flesh. You see, a husband and a wife are one flesh. That's why he's saying, no man ever hated his own flesh. So he's going to get to that point in a minute, but here he's really prepping us. And he's just saying, are you nourishing and cherishing your wife and really meeting her needs? I think this is such an essential thing. You take care of yourself, but you need to be sure you're meeting and taking care of her needs as well. You know, all I can say to you is what do you feel like after you're very hungry, you sense that need inside, and you eat and you satisfy that need? Don't you feel good? Don't you feel, wow, that was a great meal? Well, that's what your marriage is going to feel like and what you're going to experience as you meet your wife's needs, as you cherish her and nourish her, building her up in whatever way is needful. If she is satisfied, then I guarantee you she's going to want to turn around and meet your needs. It's a natural thing. It says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. So whatever you want your wife to do for you, you got to first ask, are you doing it for her? Are you meeting those needs? Very important. And then fourth, he says here in verses 30 through 32, he's encouraging us here to keep our priorities right and keep the family's priorities right. Now, what's the priority? Well, he says it here in verse 31. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. You see, your priority is to minister to the one that is one flesh with you. Do you know that your wife is the only person that term is used in reference to? This term is not used in reference to your children. Yes, they come from your flesh, but you are not one flesh with them. They are going to leave your home one day. They are temporary in your home. But your wife, with whom you are one flesh with, is permanent. This is why he says a man should leave his father and mother. Now, I've found that in marriage counseling, many times, a husband is still really caught up and controlled by his mother or by his father or both. Or a wife is still controlled by her mother or father. And do you know what that does? It brings intense conflict in a marriage. When the in-laws are controlling your marriage, it is death. It's death to your marriage. Why? Because you are betraying your one flesh relationship. You are putting your in-laws or your own parents above your wife. And the Bible doesn't say you are one flesh with your in-laws either. And you're thankful for that, right? And so it is essential that the only one that you are one flesh with is the priority of your home, of your love, of your service. The love that he is describing here is to be given first and foremost to your wife. She is the priority. In a blended family, you really have a conflict here. Do you know that the problems with the children in a blended family is the number one cause of divorce in a blended family? It's number one. It's right up there. I've seen blended families split apart in as little as 6 months over children. Because somebody says, they're your kids. No, these are my kids. I'm going to decide. You're not going to have any say over them. And I'll tell you, that's a disaster. The priority is Genesis 2:24, as quoted here in verse 31. Leave your father and mother. Be joined. Literally, that word joined means to stick like glue. Be glued together with your wife. And what happens when you glue two separate things together? They become one. To rip them apart would be a disaster. So, very important principle. Nothing should be allowed to come and displace your wife as the priority in your household. Now, notice also here in this text, verse 22 and 23. We looked at this in our earlier study, but specifically verse 23. It says, "For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church." Now, your second major responsibility as a husband is to lead her and to be the head of your home. Now, this Greek word head, literally means chief or responsible one. This word is used, let me give you two passages where this word head is translated chief or head as a responsible one. The first is in Matthew 21:42, where it says concerning Jesus said, "Have you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone?" Now that word is literally head, the same word used here in this text. In Acts chapter 18, verse 6, when Paul is being resisted by those he's sharing the gospel with, he says, "When they opposed him and blasphemed, he shook his garments and said to them, 'Your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean.'" In other words, he is saying, your blood is your own responsibility. It's on your head, your responsibility, your shoulders, because you are rejecting the truth. So this word literally means to be the chief or the responsible one. It's the same meaning, the same concept as I expressed in our study with the wives. In 1 Timothy 3:5, it says there that a husband is to rule his own house well. And that word rule is a Greek word that means manage, to manage well. So you, as the husband, are the manager of your home. You are the chief responsible one. You will be standing in front of the Lord Jesus Christ one day, and you will have to give account for your stewardship as a husband and a father. That's the bottom line. Because you are the responsible one. When something goes wrong in a business or a company, who do they look to? It's the chief officer of that company. It's the manager. It's whoever's in charge. That is who they're going to. Because the buck stops at his desk, and this responsibility stops with you. So you need to take this to heart, guys. This is your God-given responsibility. And so you need to heed this. What is headship? How do you become the head? How do you lead in your home? Leadership is basically, let me give you 4 different ways you should be leading. First, you should be the initiator in your home. In spiritual matters, in conversation, in romance, in conflict resolution, in whatever the issue is, you should be the initiator. Because it says in 1 John 4:19 that he was the initiator, right? It says we love him because he first loved us. He stepped forward first. Your leadership should be as far as your example. Jesus said in John 13:15, he said, I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. And so, as the husband, as the head, you are the example. And your wife is looking at your example. Your children are watching your example. What they see you do is what they're going to end up doing. Not what you tell them to do, but what they see you doing. That's what they're going to do. Because you're the head. And you're the responsible one. You have the responsibility to oversee, not do every single thing in the house, but to oversee and make sure that everything is done. That's leadership. That's what a manager of a business does. They oversee. And then fourthly, good decision making. You need to make good decisions. If you are not the initiator, if you're not the example, if you are not the overseer and a good decision maker, your wife is not going to trust you as the leader of your home. And if you want her to trust you, then this is your responsibility. You have to take leadership here. And you have to ask the Lord to give you the grace to do this. Now, your third responsibility is in 1 Peter chapter 3. Turn over there with me. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 7. Your third, fourth, and fifth responsibilities are listed here in this particular text. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 7. Peter lays out basically the same exhortation here in this text. He first addresses the wives and encourages them, commands them to submit to their husbands. And then he lays his sights upon the husbands. In verse 7, he says, likewise, you husbands, dwell with them with understanding. So, your third responsibility here is to lovingly understand your wife. Now, what does that mean? How do you understand your wife? Now I tell you, there's some chuckles here tonight. I have had that same experience and response when I have mentioned this in marriage counseling. The husband will sit there and he says, yeah, sure, Steve. How am I supposed to do that? And I have an answer for that. God commands you to understand her. And if he commands you to understand her, then you can understand her. How do you do it? Well, the first way is you ask God for it. Probably the best example of this is in 1 Kings 3:9, where Solomon came to the Lord and he said, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. Now, did the Lord give Solomon what he asked for? Yeah, he sure did. He gave him an understanding and a wise heart to understand his people. And you simply have to ask the Lord for it as well. If you will ask God to give you an understanding of your wife, you will get it. The second way you can find this understanding is ask your spouse for it. Ask your wife for understanding. You know what this word here, understand, means? It means to know by investigation. That's what the Greek word means. So if you want to understand her and know her, you must know her by investigation. You must ask some questions. You must say, well, what do you think about that? What do you feel about that? Why do you think that? Why do you like that? It's as simple as that. Ask the question. It says in Proverbs 5, verse 1. Isn't that a novel idea? Ask for the understanding. Proverbs 5:1. Solomon said, my son, pay attention to my wisdom. Lend your ear to my understanding. You see, if you want to understand someone, you have to ask and you have to lend your ear. You have to listen. You have to ask and you have to listen. It is no more profound than that. It's no more difficult than that. The third way that you understand is in the midst of conflict, in the midst of disagreements. If you want to understand her, then you have to listen in the midst of conflict. It says in Proverbs 15:32, he who disdains instruction despises his own soul, but he who heeds rebuke gets understanding. Now, how many times have you had a conflict with your spouse and you will say to your wife, or your wife will say to you, honey, if you would have just not done this, I would not have been upset. I would not have gotten upset at all if you would have just done this or said this or something other than what took place. So what they're doing is they're reproving you. They're telling you, look, this is what bothered me. You know what that's going to give you? Understanding. Understanding of what makes that person tick. You know, my daughter, many years ago, when she was very young, she said to me, she said, you know, Dad, how come I'm the only one that gets in trouble around here? You know? She says, I'm the only one, getting disciplined here. And she said, you and Mom don't ever seem to fight about anything. I mean, what's the deal? And I said, it's very simple, honey. I have learned what your wife, what my wife does not like, and I make sure I don't do that. And I have learned what my wife does like, and I try and do that as often as I can. And vice versa. She knows what bothers me, and she doesn't do it. She knows exactly what I do like, and she does it as often as possible. And that's what makes a good marriage, because you have learned to understand each other and what makes that person tick, what upsets them and what blesses them. And you will learn that by heeding the rebuke. that comes your direction. So if you want to love your wife, ask God to give you an understanding heart. And then ask, and then listen. The fourth responsibility is to lovingly honor her. Notice the next part of this. Dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel. Now, this weaker vessel obviously is referring to physically weaker. Now, there are exceptions to that rule I've seen in some marriages, but I guarantee in most marriages, the husband is stronger, physically stronger than his wife. And so you are to honor her because of this particular issue. Now, the word honor here literally means to treasure, to value, or to respect. In any Bible dictionary you look this word up, that's what it means, and how it is used in not only in biblical Greek, but also in classical Greek. So what does it mean? What does it mean, and what doesn't it mean? Well, first off, I think to honor and respect your wife does not mean that you are to give in to her every whim, or when she gets upset and she doesn't like your decisions, you just naturally give in to it. That is not what it means to honor her or respect her. Now, I know that sometimes wives would like it to mean that, but that's not what it means. Because to treasure, to value, to respect will never negate the headship of the husband. And so it doesn't mean that. It refers specifically to the attitude of heart and to the willingness to listen to her, hear her, and respond to her, whatever the need would be. It basically goes along with nurturing her and cherishing her, as we looked in the Ephesian passage. Now, the greatest respect that you can give to her is listening to her. And listening to her thoughts, her ideas, her opinions, her feelings about what's going on. I believe that this is so critically seen and so importantly seen in one particular story out of the Old Testament. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 25. Let me just set this story up. This story basically takes place while Saul is chasing David. He is running from position to position all over Israel. And at the point of this story, he is up on Mount Carmel. And he is taking care of a man's flocks. He's protecting them from thieves and robbers. And this particular man's name is Nabal, and his wife was Abigail. And one day, David sent one of his men to Nabal and said, Nabal, hey, can I have a couple of sheep out of your flock? I've been watching and protecting your herd here. And Nabal sent back a messenger and said, get lost. I'm not giving you one thing. Get out of my face. Now, that's my paraphrase, but that's what he was saying. Well, this got David extremely angry. David said to his men, guys, strap your swords on. We're going to go take care of business at Nabal's house, and we're going to kill every single male in that household. So they get on their horses, but in the meantime, Abigail gets wind of what took place, and she gets some provisions, and she goes out and meets David. Before he gets to the house, stops David, and tells David, look, David, don't do this. This isn't right. Don't go kill my husband. His name means what it says, and the name Nabal means fool. And so basically she said, his name really describes him. And don't do this. This is not an honorable thing to do over a couple of sheep. Don't go kill every male for this. And here is David's response. Then David said to Abigail, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed is your advice, and blessed are you, because you have kept me this day from coming to bloodshed and from avenging myself with my own hand. For indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, surely by morning light no males would have been left to Nabal." So David received from her hand what she had brought him and said to her, now this is the key, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I have heeded your voice and respected your person." Pretty powerful example, is this not? He listened to her. And if you as a husband don't listen to the advice of your wife, you are going to be enabled. You are going to be foolish. Because I guarantee you, she's going to have some great advice for you. There are other times when she will not have good advice for you. Remember Abraham. The one time he shouldn't have listened to her, he did. The time, and vice versa. It went back and forth. I mean, these are examples in Scripture that you should heed. There are times you should listen and heed, and other times you should not. You have the ultimate responsibility before God. Now, fifth and last, your last responsibility is to lovingly treat her as an equal heir of the kingdom. Notice verse 7. He said, "And as being heirs together," literally those two words, heirs together, mean joint heir or co-heir of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Now, this is an important issue because headship and submission has nothing to do with the equality of a husband and a wife. They are equal in the sight of God. But one is given the responsibility as the head, and the other is to submit to that headship. Just the same way as your employer. You submit to your employer. You're equal to that employer, no matter who they are. But he is the head, he is the manager, and you're an employee. And so it's no different than that. But it's important that that employer treat you in a respectful way. And it is important for the employee to treat his employer in a respectful way. And when you have that kind of relationship, you see each other as equals. Now, I have found in marriage counseling, again, that many times guys take the headship issue to an extreme, and they dominate, they domineer, they control every single thing without asking anybody's opinion. They could care less. And that is not treating your wife as an equal heir. Okay? Because you're not even listening. You're not even asking for advice. After you get the advice, you should go back and take it to the Lord and make a decision because you are the head. But do you have enough respect to even ask for input on that? Now, in our church leadership, I guarantee you, this is the way it works. In our elder board, all of the guys, I'm telling you, so many times our elders have changed my mind because they have good advice. They have a better understanding of something, or they give me information that I haven't considered. And other times, I have changed their minds. But they give me the right to make that final decision. But I would be a fool not to listen and seek their advice. And the same thing works in a husband-wife relationship. You have to treat each other as equals. This is how I believe you practically honor your wife, as an heir together. Now, this word heirs together is also used in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 6, where it says the Gentiles should be fellow heirs of the same body, because the Jews saw themselves superior to the Gentiles. And so there was a conflict between the Jews and Gentiles. And so basically he's saying, look, you guys are co-inheritors of the promises of God. You're equal in the sight of God. So there's no difference between you. You're equal. In Galatians 3:28, it says, Paul said, for there is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female. For you are all one in Christ Jesus. So this oneness here speaks of this union, this being united as one, as equals in the sight of God. So you have to treat each other in that manner. When you treat each other in that manner, then you are truly honoring your wife. You are honoring your husband. Now, the problem is when a husband is domineering, never asks any opinion, never asks any insights, any input, that's not treating her as an equal. Vice versa. I've seen wives that treat their husband in a way that is extremely disrespectful. I mean, they don't listen. They do stuff behind his back. They belittle his ideas, his thoughts on a subject. They belittle his decision making. So why? So they can be the head of their home. That's why. And they're not treating him as an equal. They treat him, many times I've seen wives treat their husbands like they're one of the children. And that is not what God has called. And so I believe that you can have an equal relationship, and you can have a respectful relationship, and you can still have this model as you as a head, you as that final decision maker, and your wife submitted to you. I believe that that is the image, the illustration given here in this picture. Now, did Jesus come and act superior to us? Oh, no way. If he did, he would never have gotten down at the feet of the disciples and washed their feet. Never. Wouldn't have ever happened. And the same thing is true for the church in its relationship to Christ. We need to serve him, bow at his feet. Very important. Amen? Amen. Let's go to him. Lord, we thank you tonight that, Lord, you are so loving, so caring. Lord, the examples and illustrations are all over the scripture of how to do what you have commanded us to do here. And Lord, I do pray for every husband here, Lord, that you would lay that calling, that responsibility in each of these areas upon each heart here. Lord, I pray that you would make each one of us as husbands, Lord, loving sacrificially, Lord, giving of ourselves for our wives. Lord, help us to be truly the head of our home, to take that responsibility on seriously. And Lord, to truly understand and honor and love our wives as our equals and not as slaves or not as inferiors. Lord, give us that balance and understanding in this area. Lord, I pray for any of the singles that are here in our midst tonight as well. Lord, that you would make these single men, Lord, godly men, that they would take these issues to heart. That every single woman, Lord, would take these issues to heart as well. And Lord, that you would place these character qualities, Lord, within our hearts. We believe you to do that, Lord. We ask it in Jesus' name. I want to thank you for watching our program. I trust that God has spoken to your heart. I believe that God is trying to reach you and help you resolve the problems in your marriage. But for those of you that have never made a commitment to Christ, your first step is to respond to God's invitation. Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Do you want his rest? Do you want his peace and his power? If you do, ask God to forgive you. Invite Christ into your heart, and he'll fill you with his Holy Spirit. If you do, God will radically change you, your life, and your marriage. For those of you that have already made a commitment to Christ, you're a Christian. I want to encourage you to identify where you're failing in your marriage and obey God's commands. Trust his promises. Open your heart to him. Do what he's told you to do. May the Lord richly bless your marriage.
You are the hand that catches my fall. You are the friend that answers my call. You are my day. You are my night. You are my love. You are my life. You are the love I need. You are the air I breathe. You are my love, my life, always, forever. I would lay down my life just to be by your side. You are my love, my life, always, forever. Always, forever. Always, forever. You are the grace that covers my sin.